Welcome to Power Up Memphis. I'm your host, Gale Jones Carson, the Vice President of Community and External Affairs for Memphis Light Gas and Water. The aim of Power Up Memphis is to take you, our customers, on an inside tour of MLGW to share our programs and operations with you. And by doing so, we can all better understand how we function as your utility provider. On today's show, MLGW President and CEO, JT Young, will discuss infrastructure improvements, lessons learned from Winter Storm Landon, and MLGW projects, and a newly created committee to address outages in Memphis and Shelby County. The committee is the Outage Improvement Advisory Team, which is made up of energy experts, members of MLGW's Neighborhood Advisory Committee, MLGW's Community Advisory Committee, representatives from Shelby County suburbs, and other MLGW customers. Our other guest today is Reynold Douglas, who is the General Services Director for the City of Germantown, and he is representing Germantown Mayor Mike Palazzola on the Outage Improvement Advisory Team. I want to thank each of you all for taking time to be on the show today to share some valuable information with our customers and our viewing audience. So, President Young, can you just give us a talk and an overview of how MLGW dealt with Winter Storm Landon?
Well, thank you very much, Gail. Just certainly honored to be here today and certainly grateful to have Reynold here with us. Looking forward to him participating. Winter Storm Landon really was a challenge. We talked about this storm. We knew it was coming. One of the things that you never know in advance of a storm like that is what's the actual impact going to be. And what we learned after the storm came through, this is the fourth largest event that has affected MLGW. It impacted over 233,000 customers over the course of the time with outages. And the restoration process, which we know brought a lot of frustration to our customers, was probably one of the most challenging that we faced because of the significance of the damage that had occurred. We did learn a few things. I know we'll get to talk about that a little bit later, but we are certainly wanting to make sure this Outage Improvement Advisory Team that's been assembled is going to be working hard to bring about some options, ideas from many of our stakeholders that you denoted, that we will be able to hopefully find ways to make things better moving forward. We know that our customer expectations continue to rise, just like they're rising for other goods and services. And our goal is to make sure that we stay ahead of the curve in that regard. And so our mission is to safely deliver services that create and sustain superior customer experiences. And that's what we want to make sure that we continue to do. And so this storm was challenging, but I am so grateful and just honored to be a part of the team with so many folks who worked hard day and night to get the power back on. Could we do more? Could we do better? Absolutely. And we're going to do that. But I just want to say thank you to everyone who was engaged, including those partners that we had that came in to help us during that time.
So we, as a result of the storm, we came up with the Outage Improvement Advisory Committee. And so can you explain the importance and reason for having this new committee?
Yeah, absolutely. The team was formed, you may recall, during that time, of course, especially during the restoration, beginning about day 3 or 4 of the restoration process. Lots of customers frustrated. Communication wasn't working as well. The text information about your outage status was having problems. Customers were frustrated. City Hall got a lot of comments from the City of Memphis. So Mayor Strickland actually reached out and suggested that we formulate sort of a community-based group. And he and I spent some time talking about this that would actually provide some input on options. Some people think about, well, let's just put everything underground and that way we don't have to worry about trees and all of that. And a lot of people have other opinions. And so really the team was assembled with the objective in mind to provide the input that we need. We have a 5-year service improvement plan that is actually underway now. And that plan was initiated back in 2020. And we are on our way with that plan, seeing about a 20% reduction through 2021 in outage minutes. but we know we have more to do. So what we want this team to understand and to help us with is, in recognition of the fact that we've got something in process that's going in over time, is there anything else we need to be thinking about? Or can we expedite any of those types of initiatives that we have in that plan, whether it's tree trimming, equipment replacement, automation that we're installing for distribution systems, et cetera. And so that's really the genesis of that team came from that. And we are planning to meet over the next 2, maybe 3 months at the most, to factor in those ideas and opinions to the extent they have budget impacts into our next budget cycle.
Okay, thank you for that. So Reynold, as a member of the newly formed Outage Improvement Advisory Committee, what would you like to see happen? What are your expectations of this committee?
Thank you, Gail. What I would like to see out of this a new formed team is that we establish milestones, okay, with action plans and timelines for getting the milestones completed. And then after we do that internally, then let's figure out how to roll this out to the public in a meaningful way that the public can understand it and get behind it and support it. As we went through our listen to learn at our first meeting, it was very beneficial because the team is very diverse, whereas some of the team members are familiar with the operations of MLGW and some are not as familiar. So the first meeting was a really good meeting to get started with this new team.
So Reynold, during the storm, how do you remember Germantown being impacted by the February 12th storm?
That is a great question, and thanks for asking. When the storm hit Germantown, what I deal with is actually on the commercial side. And we fared well. We have 17 emergency generators so that when power outages happen, we can maintain business as usual. On the residential side, we did get a lot of calls from customers who were not happy that they could not actually talk to someone at MLGW, or the outage map was not updated as quickly as they thought it should be. So we got a lot of calls with that. But we did handle those calls as best we could through our customer service center and would inform people to make sure to call into the outage line number so that things are updated in the MLGW system. But it went on and on. Customers really got upset after like maybe the 3rd day of not having power. And those were areas where there's a lot of tree canopy. And where there's not a lot of tree canopy, some of the areas were the old infrastructure of underground cabling. So it was a storm of epic proportions that no one really could have planned for.
So, Mr. President, would you please address the concern that many of our customers have expressed regarding how quickly some areas in Memphis and Shelby County have their services restored over other areas?
Well, and I think that's really a great question, Gail. Thank you for that. And let me just say, we talked about this yesterday at the meeting. It's really important for customers, and I know this is not something that's on top of mind day to day, and I understand that. But when we do restoration following a storm, whether it's a storm like Landon last month, or whether it's a overnight thunderstorm that takes out several thousand customers, our focus is on safely optimizing the restoration of power. So we're focused on safety. We're focused on getting critical entities back up as quickly as possible, whether those are hospitals, water pumping stations, et cetera, emergency locations, police, fire, and all that. And then we start looking at how can we pick up our major circuits with most customers on them first. We don't go neighborhood by neighborhood. We don't go by zip codes. We don't go by regions. We go by the impacted numbers of customers, and our systems tell us that. So we know by virtue, for example, we had 233,000 customers that experienced an outage during Landon. We have systems that tell us where those are concentrated across our system, and we have troubleshooters who go out and others to assess the damage. But our goal is to make sure that the major circuits that serve the most customers get restored first. And those circuits traverse, we have over 60, we had, I should say, over 60 to 70 of those circuits that were out during Landon. And so we had to assemble crews to go and deal with those major circuits first. Those customers who are served downstream from those circuits, customers who are served off of what we would call smaller circuits or branch lines or behind fuses, those customers will be restored in the order after those major lines are brought back on. And I gave the analogy, like if your main breaker at your house is off or has failed and you're trying to fix a light switch in your kitchen, you really can fix the light switch in your kitchen, but it won't work until you get your main breaker back on. So our order of restoration flows that way, and it does not consider any geographical preference over the other. It looks at it the way I just described it. And that's, by the way, a standard across the utility industry for power restoration. Essentially, that's the way it works.
And so, Reynold, I do remember at one press conference we were having, someone from Germantown, made a comment or a question really about that the person felt that the customers in the inner city services were restored first. And there are people inside the Beltway of Memphis who think that the services are restored first and out east. So, Mr. President, that was an excellent explanation of how we restore services to let customers know we don't have preferential treatment for restoring services.
And where the damage is worse, of course, it's going to take longer to get service back on. That's the other thing, too. Where you have massive, which we did in this case, tree damage, rear lot line, construction's hard to get to places, those are going to take a lot longer to fix. And that's just the nature of how we serve customers.
And so, Reynold, you did mention that you all received a lot of calls from your customers. So how were you able to respond to your customers? Say, for example, how your social media technology, it has a huge impact on how we communicate with our customers. What are some of the processes that the city of Germantown used during the crisis to alert your customers, to calm your customers about the storm or, outage, when the services will be restored?
Right. I will say this first. It's really hard to calm down a customer who is upset. It's just important to listen because a lot of times I just need to vent. But the processes that we have in place here and even during the storm, our public information office, they have a Facebook page to communicate with the residents, customers in Germantown. We have our city webpage that does the same. So that was primarily the outlet that was used during that time. And it worked well for the most part. But again, when people are without power and expecting to have power as quick as everything happens nowadays, there's no way you can make people happy with that. That's sad to say, but that's kind of the way that is. But that's the way we handle anything that comes in as it relates to light, gas, and water outages is through our public information office.
Okay, so what we're going to do right now is take a quick break, and we will be right back. Thank you, President Young and Reynold Douglas. We will be right back. So, President Young, you have for a while now talked about our 5-year improvement plan, infrastructure improvement plan at Memphis Light, Gas and Water. Could you give us an update on that?
Well, yeah, Gail, it's really continues. It has had some challenges. Of course, COVID impacted a lot of things. We rolled this plan out. It began in 2020, which of course was right at the front end of COVID. And so some of the things like getting access to tree trimming resources and having enough of those folks as well as accessing other things that we needed for the initiative, was a little bit slowed in getting going. But we're, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen about a 20% reduction in outage minutes based on the baseline of 2019. Our goal in the 5-year plan was to see outage minutes reduced by 50%. So in reality, and it's not 100% because of the initiative, but a lot of it is. So the reality is that we're on our way in terms of outage reductions. We still have a number of infrastructure related things to do. The distribution automation that I mentioned, which is the system that actually will be installed and is being installed on our distribution system to automatically reconnect when there's a car hit a pole or something happens with a tree on a line or something. It can actually reroute the power automatically and minimize the number of customers that are impacted. There will still be outages, but hopefully those outages will be fewer and certainly shorter in duration because of that. So those things are ongoing, and we are currently trying to ensure that we've gotten 3 new contracts that have been approved. One of which is for improving the underground system, and so we're doing a lot of things with that. Those types of initiatives, and I think customers will begin to see and have begun to see some improvement, and we look forward to seeing even more over the next few years.
Okay, so you did mention tree trimming, and also, Reynolds, you mentioned that some of the areas that were out longer had a lot more trees. So President Young, could you talk a little bit about our tree trimming program at Memphis Light, Gas and Water, and how that might be one of the top, if not the top reason for outages in Memphis and Shelby County?
We covered yesterday some of the major causes for storms, and certainly trees are right up there and it's really trees in conjunction with weather and storms, if you will. Memphis is an urban forest, as I've heard it described, the Memphis area, the community. And we showed some maps yesterday of the foliage coverage of trees in our community, and the area that sustained on average the longest duration outages in the East Memphis area has a lot of rear lot line services, meaning their power lines run behind homes, between houses in the back, which means for us to get to those, we have to go through yards and all of that. And there's a whole lot of tree coverage back in those areas. And so we have a tree trimming cycle that we'd like to get to, of about a 3-year cycle. And we are at about a 5-year cycle right now. We're trying to improve that because we know that when those trees are effectively trimmed back away from the lines, there tends to be fewer outages related to the trees. And we are very, very aware of how important it is to maintain the beauty of the community. The trees, certainly help make this community beautiful. So we're sensitive to that. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that we keep the power on. And when we put those lines in, the trees weren't where they are today, a lot of cases. So we have to balance the importance of both of those extremes. And so we're working to do that. And I believe we're going to see some improvement over time. We actually have 2 contractors today that are working on our behalf to do tree trimming around our power lines. And I will just add, trimming around power lines is different than just getting trees taken out or trimming them in your yard. There are certain certifications that have to be had. We have 23,000 volts or 12,000 volts, depending on which lines they're trimming around in many areas. And so it is not the kind of work that just anyone can do. And so we want to make sure, we're safety focused. That's our core value. And so we want to make sure that's the case. But it's moving along. It's slower than we'd like, but we're going to continue to push forward and get that where it needs to be.
So our tree trimming program at Memphis Light, Gas and Water is on we basically are trimming trees every day pretty much, and we're on a 3-year rotation. Is that correct? Well,
we're trimming trees every day, so we're trying to be proactive. We've got probably 40, 50 crews out there today trimming trees, but we really probably need somewhere around 60 to 70 every day to really get it onto that 3-year cycle that we need. And so that's the challenge we're finding. We're on about a 4.5 to 5-year cycle, and we're trying to catch up, which is going to take some challenges. We try to trim about 1,400. Our goal is to trim about 1,400 miles a year. and that will get us essentially close to that 3-year cycle. But it's a challenge, and we're working hard to get that done.
So when we talk about a 3-year cycle, that means, say, for example, if my trees are trimmed, if they're in the close to the lines or in the lines, like Gas and Water trims my trees today. So in about 3 years, if we get on schedule, in about 3 years, they will come back to see if my trees need to be trimmed again. So that is the 3-year cycle you're referencing.
Yeah, industry best practice is about a 3-year cycle. And that does mean, of course, if you have trees around lines near your home, you can look out and see if we're out there today trimming it, then that means 3 years from today, roughly, so in 2025, we'd be back out in your area trimming as well. Again, the goal is always to keep them a certain distance away from our lines. You don't wait until they grow into the line. That's too late. So the goal is to keep them a certain distance away. And that's really the objective.
So, Reynold, you did mention that you all have, some trees too, quite a few trees in Germantown. Do you all have any kind of tree trimming program, or do you just work with MLGW on the tree trimming?
As it relates to the power lines, we just rely on MLGW's program for that. As we talked about during our first meeting, that maybe the elected officials can get together with MLGW to create a policy that would help with tree trimming, tree removal as needed. But that's going to be something we talk about in our committee, and hopefully we can move forward with that, because it's not all on MLGW to trim trees. There's trees that eventually get into the right of way or the easement of power lines that were not there 3 years prior to. And sometimes people, for the sake of decorations or trying to hide something, as far as decorations go in their yards, the landscaping, they will actually plant underneath power lines. So that's something that should be looked at and actually policed by code enforcement. But those are things we can talk about during our upcoming meetings.
And so let me ask you, you know how people love their trees. They just do. We do. It makes the cities look beautiful. If there were a policy to be created to have code enforcement targeting areas that need to care more for their trees, what kind of pushback do you think that you would get from homeowners?
Well, I think education is the best way to get, an old term that's been used, buy-in from customers. And the more you educate, the more people can understand the importance of what you're trying to do. Now, as far as just going in and removing trees or cutting trees, I do think it's important to have an arborist to actually tag what really needs to be done. Because if you take someone who's just trimming trees, then that's all that they're doing. They're not really trying to care about how the tree is going to grow later. And I think, again, just educating the public on how trees need to be trimmed or removed so that they can understand what needs to be done so that we can minimize power outages.
So even though we just had this major power outage, trees were everywhere. I mean, in folks' homes, in the street, I mean, just everywhere. President Young, do you think, and Reynold, do you think that customers will be kinder to the idea of their trees being trimmed? Because a lot of times when we trim trees, we get complaints about how we trim the trees.
Well, Gail, I'll tell you this, I can't speculate. I know that to your point, I know we have had and probably will continue to have concerned citizens and customers who are obviously concerned about the way we trim, how we trim. We have actually arborists on our staff as well here at MLGW. And so the point I make is I'll reference back to what I said a little bit earlier, and that is the importance of having that balance and understanding that, the line that runs in front of your home or behind your home doesn't just serve you as a customer. So we have to think about everybody that is served by the network of lines that runs through communities. And that's what the basis of the tree trimming concept is around, is the fact that there are, this power goes everywhere. And so we're trying to be considerate of all customers, and safety is certainly important as we do that. And so we're continuing to look for ways to make sure this is better. We look forward to the input from the outage advisory team, and know that we'll make some improvements as we move forward.
So as you mentioned, the outage advisory team, one of the questions that came up during the first meeting was, what percentage of the information will MLGW actually implement? Are we just making presentations? How much of the feedback will be used or taken into consideration?
I thought that was a great question. And let me say this, and I'll answer the way we answered it yesterday in the meeting. 100% of the feedback will certainly be considered. 100% of the feedback will certainly be taken seriously. As to what percentage of that will be implemented, that's a different question, because there are certain ramifications to any suggestion. And so what we would do is say, we're going to look at the highest and best use when it comes to funding, when it comes to feasibility for other reasons, safety and other reasons. We have to consider a number of things. So that's the value of having such a diverse team, as Reynolds mentioned, such a diverse team of stakeholders involved, is I think we'll get to some really good solutions that will be able to augment what we're already doing to help make things better for our customers.
I want to thank Reynolds Douglas, who is the General Services Director for the City of Germantown, for being here with us today, and also for serving on our Outage Improvement Advisory Team. Before we leave, Reynolds, please give us some thoughts on where you think we're headed with the outages and the benefits of this committee.
Well, Gail, thank you so much for the opportunity to be a part of this meeting today. And my expectations and what I really see that our committee moving toward is something that will benefit and get information out to the public as it relates to outages and the improvements that we will recommend. And so I think we have a really good start, and I'm looking forward to being part of a great movement.
Thank you so much for that. And again, thank you for serving on the committee. President Young, how many meetings are we going to have? And, tell us some of the tangible benefits that you expect from this committee.
Yeah, so I think actually we're going to see from this team, I believe tangibly, some great options. We're going to have about 6 meetings, give or take, maybe 5 to 7 meetings. The first 2 will be in person. We're going to have some virtual meetings after that. The public's input will be certainly brought to bear even beyond the committee, because we have a portal that allows the public to participate in general, and that's helpful. And I just think we're going to have some great options on the table to be considered to help improve services to our customers that will help augment what we already have in place to make things better for customers as they seek to have, for us to be able to live up to our mission that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And so I'm excited about it. So grateful for Reynolds and others joining that team for us, and look forward to some great results.
Again, thank you, President Young, for being on. Thank you, Reynolds Douglas, for being on and sharing this valuable information for our customers. I want to thank our viewing audience for watching Power Up Memphis. Thank you very much.